SM, the Media Project. Driven by data. Driven by technology. Driven by community development. Driven by the need to get results for your project. SM Graves Associates, delivering real estate development to you, including project management and pre-development services with a keen focus on delivering community-oriented projects. We build profitable projects that respond to the needs of your neighborhood. Join the SMG family. Find us at smgravesassociates.com.
The Innovato2 listeners, you've got the Innovato2 crew here. I'm, of course, speaking of your co-hosts. I am Scott Graves.
Will Jeffries up in Burlington, Vermont.
And Ryan Munn in White River Junction.
And we are the Innovato2 crew for you. And we have a great episode tonight. Paul Shepard is in the remote his house here. I think that's the first time I've called it the his house. That's pretty. I'm very.
You're jazzing it up.
I'm jazzing it up. Yes. And Paul's here to talk. Paul, what are we going to talk about? Let's go right into that.
Well, we're going to talk about Rugged Micropower, which is my startup. I am here in Burlington too.
And you've got some Micropower is your baby.
It is my baby. It is a vision, which is mine, but lucky to have been influenced by, some familiar names that I'm sure will come up.
Well, many of our listeners are outside of this area. Talk to us about, define your company for us.
Sure, absolutely. My one sentence tagline is power management for extreme environments. And it's broad on purpose. I think there's a lot of interesting ways that we can create value. But the seed for me was planted in 2017. I was one of the first 2 employees at a local Northern Vermont space startup called Benchmark Space Systems. And they're building and selling propulsion systems for kind of this. There's this new space market, right? Everybody is familiar with things like Starlink satellites. We're launching a lot more satellites now than we were 20 years ago. And these satellites look a lot different. 20 years ago, satellites were massive and they had to go really far away so that they covered a huge area, of the Earth. And they needed to last for like 10 to 20 years to pay for themselves. So that these days, almost all of the satellites that get launched are smaller, don't need to live as long. There are a lot more of them. And so when you are designing these, the things that you need to focus on are different. You want the cost to be less. You want the theory of operation to be simpler, right? You can't take 3 years to design something if you need to build it in 6 months and fly it for a year and then it's on to the next thing. So when I was at Benchmark, I was trying to buy electronic parts to build these systems that were targeted to this new commercial space market. And in particular, the chips that do the important work of taking energy from batteries or solar panels or other sources and turning that into energy that, cameras and microprocessors and, storage, that's called power management. And, space is an extreme environment. So, there's a pretty big gap in the market. There aren't chips available to do this work, or there aren't enough. And so I was frustrated trying to design these things. And after 5 years, eventually I decided, well, if other folks weren't going to fill this gap in the market and make the satellite designers' lives easier, maybe I needed to do it. So
therein lies the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
The story of many entrepreneurs.
Yeah, if you actually, and I was just listening to one of your recent podcasts. I think Megan said, "Fall in love with the problem, not the solution." And so that I noted that one. I wrote that one down. It was a good perspective.
Megan Downey of Sheeted Raps. That was one of the better quotes we've had all season, frankly.
I think I've used it several times since then, just in the intervening months since we spoke with her.
And so that seed was planted about 2 years ago. That's when I decided to leave my job. And then about a year and a half ago, we had some really spectacular news for the state of Vermont and northern New England, which was the launch of the Vermont Gallium Nitride Tech Hub. And I think Doug, when he was on the podcast, talked about this a little bit. One of the things that this material, gallium nitride, is really good at is doing energy conversion. And the other thing, which I don't think he mentioned, maybe he did, these materials, gallium nitride, they are also naturally going to work well in extreme environments. High temperatures and radiation can cause trouble for our tradition. The most common material that we build chips out of is silicon, and it tends to be more sensitive. Gallium nitride tends to be less sensitive. So it was always on my roadmap. And I also have worked on other similar materials in past lives. So when I found out that we were going to have a focus on gallium nitride here in northern Vermont, it felt like a scratcher ticket. I was like, I should have been buying scratcher tickets today. It was my lucky day.
You also have a lot of other things there in the extreme environment too, like like lightning is an issue out in space, right? We had a guest,
it is charge buildup and discharge, right? It's like micro scale lightning, absolutely. And then it does kind of come down to earth as well. We have companies like Beta right here in northern Vermont. Aviation in general also is somewhat of an extreme environment. These are also environments where reliability is is absolutely paramount. Inside the engine of a car, you absolutely cannot have the electronics inside the engine bay fail. That could kill someone. So they have to be high reliability, and the high temperatures inside the engine bay also count as an extreme environment. So, that this is one that I kind of know specifically, but extreme environments are broader. And, if you solve a problem in low Earth orbit, maybe it gives you a lot of information to help solve that same problem in a jet engine or in a car engine. So
I like how many times just in the past few minutes you've said the word problem. Again, that falling in love with the problem, not the solution necessarily. I was curious too, how did you make that first connection with Doug Merrill? Because I know that's been an important touch point.
Oh yeah, Doug Merrill's been an amazing resource and a mentor of mine long before I actually ever started or thought about rugged micropower. I actually, this is one of my favorite Vermont networking stories. I met Doug a little bit in passing through Benchmark Space Systems. But more than that, I really got to know him at Peak Pitch one year when we got to go skiing together. And, this is that we've said, I think, Vermont's superpower is our ability to connect with each other. So
you should refer to that. This is the most Vermonty of venture capital networking events for entrepreneurs. It is a ski event put on by Fresh Tracks Capital, one of our most well-known Vermont-based venture capital funds, led by Karen Cross, and they have a ski event every year. Where is it? At Mount Snow or Mount?
It's at Sugarbush.
Oh, it's at Sugarbush. That's right. Yeah, north, not south.
Yeah, I felt bad for the organizers because they did it on a powder day, so everyone was a little bit distracted from the pitching because the skiing was definitely good that day.
But the idea, just to quickly overview peak pitch, you have the time on the chairlift. Entrepreneurs are paired with investors or potential advisors or partners, and you have that time on the chairlift to get to know each other and get to know that idea. So it's like a pitch, a timed pitch, but with the very practical timing reason.
A little longer than an elevator pitch, just enough time for a few follow-up questions, right?
Exactly. Just a little longer than an elevator pitch. And then they have several other events during the same day. There's a lunch and then later a larger pitch off and prizes in the afternoon. But highly recommend checking that out each year. I think it's typically March, beginning of March.
Yeah. End of February, beginning of March, something like that. Yeah.
So you've mentioned a lot of different sort of applications for the gallium nitride technology and maybe broadly or indirectly use cases for the technology that you're developing. I'm curious, your focus is on space. Do you, is there a particular aspect that has you narrowing in on that? Is it your experience specifically, or are there certain fundamental elements of what you're doing that really only apply to space that might not be applicable in the same way to some of those other harsh environments you talked about?
That's a really good question. I would say that my experience at Benchmark Space System, I got to know what the commercial space, new space market is like, and it's still a fairly small market, right? If I decided that I was going to build something to solve automotive problems, I'd be going up against all of the top 20 chip companies in the world. Everybody wants automotive because the devices are valuable. And, if you sell into a General Motors or a Toyota, you've guaranteed millions or tens of millions of units per year, right? So it's a good business for the big companies. The reason that I really like space, first of all, it's fun. Come on, right? It is fun. But more than that, it's a small enough industry that relationships and reputations matter, right? If I starting a small business in Vermont, if I accept commoditization as part of the business plan, it doesn't feel like that has a good life, to it. So by focusing on space, it gives us the opportunity to spend more money, push the envelope, again, because these devices are worth more, right? It costs more money to buy stuff that is designed to operate in space. And also the fact that I've met folks, I know who the customers are, and I've really lived that specific problem. It feels like that's the market that I can really address their pain points.
This is the kind of thing that we talk about a lot on the show, as far as having a business that's that's centered here locally, but recognizing a marketplace that is national, global, right? That with you can create a sustainable business that generates a good payroll for the founder and for the workers, right? And ideally would employ some number of people too.
Yeah.
Fully, let's call that full participation in the economy. You also mentioned off air the year early on of diversifying your revenue streams, which to me, it's like if you can take the business that you've created and generate income in as many different ways off of the same relatively simple, straightforward process, that's a good thing. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your process there and what has come out of that so far.
Sure, right. To your point, like being distracted can be hugely detrimental to a business. So, but having diverse income streams is really healthy. So how do you have diverse income streams and not be distracted? Where I'm at the moment, I am, I'm doing consulting. So, my goal, working with the Vegan Tech Hub and members, we want to build chips, right? But we don't have to build a chip as the very first thing that we do to create value. So, current consulting clients, I've been writing some software, helping them understand how to use other folks' hardware that they can buy on the open market. Also, we can design the circuit boards. I mean, in a way, it was the same work that I was doing with the team at Benchmark, was building the circuit boards and the software that people want to fly. And as we learn lessons from that, as we get established on the chip side, so we can do the consulting work to do designs for customers. Also, the other thing is, there is, particularly for like space related tech and really high tech, there are good federal funding pathways. SBIR grants, Small Business Innovative Research grants, are great. There are other things as well. So that's where I see, that's my plan, to try to, again, not distract ourselves by doing something unrelated, but to build up our expertise, our track record and our reputation, while selling, doing custom design services, consulting, doing funded research when we can win SBIRs, but then also focusing on developing our own branded products that, other folks can design into their circuit boards.
So, and I know you might have this is a bit of a loaded question. You have some exciting news to share with us, but you talk a little bit about the process of, you've got these different funding sources that you're pulling in, right? You're pitching to different sources, right? Talk a little bit about your process of developing what it is you're pitching, whether it's for a grant or you're going for maybe some financing or getting ready for investors. What's that look like right now?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing, and this is going to go back to first principles, always know your audience, right? So my pitch to a consulting client is different than my pitch on an SBIR proposal. And it's different, to develop these products can cost a lot of money. So I'm certainly focused on when and how do we need to engage with capital, right? Because we're probably not going to be able to bankroll. It can be $250,000 or $500,000 or $1 million to do one round of prototyping when you're talking about integrated circuits. So that's not going, that is definitely going to take talking to outside capital folks. SBIRs are interesting. When you're proposing to the government, one of the things they want to know is, are other people involved, right? And I think that a lot of capital, whether it's non-dilutive research funding or whether it is, you're trading a portion of your company, everybody wants to know, well, who else is interested, right? But I am excited. I think that pitching to capital is probably my least strong suit because of my academic background. I'm really comfortable writing proposals, but I'm really excited because I learned today that I'm a member of the 2025 cohort for Launch VT. So I'm super excited to join that team, and to learn from Lauren and everyone that she has, gathered to share their wisdom. And to focus my skills on being able to pitch, to communicate to that side of the strategic funding.
Well, congratulations, Paul, and what an achievement too. Also, as the first of many, I hope, coming through the gallium nitride tech channel as it's becoming, with the hub behind Doug Merrill, and the first in the Launch VT cohort, I believe, related to.
As far as I know, I mean, certainly there's been some other deep tech, of course, right? Mm-hmm. Benchmark was a Launch VT cohort member when I worked on. But probably, I think, yes, the first company focused on ICs, and absolutely, I am excited about the Vermont Gallium Nitride Tech Hub, and I think that Launch VT and our business community's enthusiasm for it, maybe I'm the first, but I would be shocked. I know there's no way I'm the last. Hopefully this is the beginning of something really exciting that is way bigger than rugged micropower.
It'll be interesting to see if you're deriving part of the early income in the business from consulting, it's interesting to see what that'll do for market validation for you. Also, finding clients, right? Just by its nature, put you in the middle of the marketplace. And then just what it does for you as the founder in making pitches outside of grant proposals, right? Like all of it sort of, I feel like it'll give you a lot of experience, a dense amount of experience pretty quickly, right? That's going to serve you well immediately,
I hope I'd like to think so. And I've definitely been, trying to get a sense of capital. I even had my one business class in school when I was an engineering student was it was new venture creation. And so I think that really first formed my perspective on this. But my sense, I think you all probably know this way better than I do, that maybe 20 years ago and maybe even 10 years ago, there was kind of one profile. It was, if you're seeking venture capital, it's, you have to have one specific growth trajectory, and you have to have, you have to be all in, spend our money to create that growth trajectory. And, now I'm seeing quotes from Y Combinator companies that are saying, it's not about building in one specific way. It's about, I think there's a broader, there's more diversity in terms of investor profiles, and it's no longer selling yourself to just one way. It's being truthful about who you are and about the value you can create, and being patient and finding the right relationship with the folks that want to create value in a way that aligns with what your company can naturally do.
I would imagine we're in I think, to say the least, a highly dynamic environment at this particular moment. Not only the diversification in the private sector that you're describing, right? But on top of that, your industry, as mentioned, receives a lot of grant money from the federal government through the SB1R program, and in some other lesser cases, state and federal funding. How is that affecting you now? How do you think it will be affecting you? I'm just interested to hear.
Sure.
It's a pretty weird environment right now.
Yes, it is a weird.
How are you dealing with Armageddon? Is Armageddon treating you well? Yeah.
I will say there have been moments over the last probably 4 or 5 months where I thought, why did I think, starting a business that would, like, doing business with the federal government was a big part of the plan? Like, why did I think that was a great idea? But, yeah, there's certainly chaos. I think that, the chaos is now, right? I think I was a lot more nervous 2 months ago, knowing that the chaos was coming, but not being able to do anything about it, right?
Sure.
So now we see there is a lot of chaos. And, especially I was at a conference last week where we were supposed to have about 50% of the attendees be federal employees, and most of those folks weren't able to travel. There's travel bans, even folks that are still at their desk weren't able to travel. And I feel for those folks. All of the federal folks that I've ever worked with have been really fine people. So I am a big fan of federal employees. I actually made buttons to pass around that said, "I heart federal employees," or federal workers. That said, the one silver lining, my heart really goes out to anybody that may be affected by this chaos directly. But there are also some really smart, really motivated people that are probably going to be on the market. So it's possible that one of these people might be my co-founder in 6 months.
Yeah.
That doesn't fix things. But there may be
There's going to be shifts in the marketplace.
there can be some big shifts in the market.
Regardless of whether you like them or not, they are
Yeah.
what's going to
Yeah.
happen. And
So we just have to deal with the hands that we're being dealt.
Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
So I'm curious too, specific tech aside, what are some other ideals that you have in starting your own business and building your own company? If you were to find that co-founder, like what are some key things that you want to be able to align with someone on in the vision of the company you want to build?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, because I've actually been working with Will specifically. Last month, about 2 months ago, we sat down and we said, what is the vision and what is the mission of Rugged Micropower? And I like to think that what I want Rugged Micropower to be is, if it can happen anywhere, it can happen here in Vermont. I have said to Will, I want to test the hypothesis that we can build an aerospace and defense corporation or company that acts like a public benefit corporation, and details always matter. So I can't say at this moment that we'll be a B Corp, because that's not the same, or that, I don't know what the laws are in Vermont specifically around public benefit corps, but it is very important to me as an engineer who's worked at big companies and small companies, and I've got kids. I want to make sure that Rugged Micropower identifies our employees and our employees' families and the communities that we live in as our most important stakeholders. And I think that there have been a lot of great companies. I feel like I've heard stories about when Southwest Airlines was founded, that they said employees come first, because employees that love their job do great work. And I would lean into that approach. And I think that we can create a lot of value for our customers. We can create value for our investors if everybody feels, appreciated, respected, like they get to be a whole person, not an automaton.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what about I'm curious how you'd envision remote hybrid work. I mean, it sounds like you're consulting, so you're pretty flexible in how you can operate. It doesn't sound like you guys will be manufacturing IC chips, right? That'll happen with some partner that provides the hardware. Or is that something that you might actually build in-house capacity at some point where you have a fabrication happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I personally have learned that I don't work well remote, but there are people that work really well remote. And we all experienced what it was like to work remote during the pandemic. And I myself, like a lot of my engineering colleagues, went to the office and picked up a lot of lab equipment and set up a lab in our basement, right? So Rugged Micropower definitely will have physical facilities, but it's probably more on the, we might be fabricating chips at a big foundry. Global Foundries is right here in Essex Junction. They're doing gallium nitride. Very likely to partner with them. I've been looking a lot at that. So our chips themselves are not going to get made in a building that says rugged micropower on the side. But when we get the chips, then we have to do reliability testing, and we have to, integrate them into circuit boards so that we can show our customers how to do this and things like that. So there will definitely be some on-site facilities. I aspire to be 100% remote friendly. I think we all know, I actually just made the comment to someone the other day, EMTs can't work remotely. It's just the nature of the job, right? So I'm very middle of the road. I think there are pros and cons, just generally speaking. And then obviously there are some roles where remote is absolutely no barrier whatsoever to performing the work, and somewhere it's a big barrier.
See, these are the guys who are the ideal company. You fit the profile of our future Innovato 2 locations, our mixed use co-working / residential communities.
100%. Yes.
And it sounds like, companies like yours, Paul, the people who have invested a lot of time and energy, including Doug Merrill and everyone else at UVM and the private sector, that are trying to create an ecosystem around a gallium nitride play with the federal government. It's folks like you that they're really doing that for, right? That we can create dozens of smaller independent companies.
I'm acutely aware of how many people like Doug and Lauren and even, getting to be on this podcast with you all, right? Like, I feel like there are a lot of folks rooting for me. And honestly, I'm not a stubborn person. If I felt like if I felt like no one was rooting for me, I don't know that I would stick it out. So I appreciate the support that I'm getting from the community for sure.
Cool.
And to your point as well, Paul, there are so many ways that new companies or existing companies can tie into those types of partnerships. Setting up a foundry like Global Foundries is a massive endeavor that takes millions, if not billions of dollars in investment.
Definitely billions. It's not billions for sure.
Well,
some of the biggest ones, we're talking about some of the investments that are happening in the US right now are running to the trillions.
Right.
So it is the support is happening at every level, and it's not everybody's just supporting rugged micropower, but the support that happens for reshoring technology in the US, whether it's supporting TSMC and Intel bringing capacity back to the US, or whether it's, helping a small business like rugged micropower, all of these things are creating value, and hopefully we're returning that value to our communities.
Exactly. And to your point about something you said before about rugged micropower, hopefully being the first of many to come down this channel of the gallium nitride and the Tuck Hub that we're building here, that potential partnership of Global Foundries. They have this massive investment already made into the equipment needed to actually create the physical hardware of these chips. And how many ways are there that you can actually amortize that benefit and that cost throughout the community and really build a thriving tech community in this space?
Absolutely. Yes.
Paul, when we look at the United States, so the history of creating chips, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first iteration ends up petering out and going overseas, not exclusively, but by and large, because companies didn't remain nimble, right, in their thinking as they were when they were starting up after World War II. And so we have this vibrancy, right, that's kind of going from roughly the waning years of the 40s right on through to about 1980, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, having grown up in Massachusetts, like this was a big deal, right? Because the
Massachusetts was a manufacturing and a knowledge place, and manufacturing has left.
And that happened like lickety split, right? What took 40 years to build suddenly became, in a matter of, say, less than 5 years. Are we in a better position this time around? So we've learned some lessons, right? Including that we have to reshore cutting edge, right?
and it's not, yeah, go on, but it's not just cutting edge.
But I mean, sometimes it's just this foundational technology that we should not exclusively depend on other countries for, right? But I'm going to stop there, because I can tell you have a lot of good information to offer here. So talk a little bit about why the future can be different, or why what it has to be different, but also what are our priorities in this. It's kind of like a second time around, right?
Right. Yeah. So, we all lived through the pandemic. Everybody listening to this podcast did. And we saw supply chains break, right? And globalization as a topic is immensely complex. And there are a lot of well-reasoned, thoughtful differences of opinion on it. But it's not going away, right? We're not going to bring I think I saw some numbers last week that currently 90% of the integrated circuit supply chain is in Eastern Asia. And we're not going to bring 50% of that back to the US. Where it becomes a problem, and there are really cutting edge technologies. You mentioned, that we're still trying to invent, and we're doing a pretty good job of inventing really cutting edge technologies here in the US, but we have let things that are not right on the cutting edge migrate away from our shores. And it's fine for these technologies to be globalized. They really should be, but so there was a metaphor of we should treat these technologies like essential workers, right? We all realized during the pandemic that there are people that if they don't go do their jobs, we're all in a world of hurt. And so we don't need, I'm trying not to like get way down the rabbit hole of being specific about 130 nanometer IC processes, but just, the cutting edge things that get a lot of press are, very, very small transistors. You can build massive processors, but power management has migrated away from our shores. And that's, it's not good if we can't go buy a new stereo at Best Buy. Like, that's unfortunate. But if we can't build, medical devices, because all of the power management chips that go into those medical devices are trapped on the other side of an ocean and they can't get over here, then people's lives are actually under threat because of a broken supply chain. So, I think, and this thought is not unique to me. I think that a lot of people have recognized this, that we need to develop, we need to redevelop capacity to make things that aren't exotic, that aren't cutting edge, but they're really important. And we don't need to own 50% of the market, but maybe we need 5% of the capacity, so that the next time, we have a major supply chain problem, that we can still get ventilators to hospitals.
This is the most interesting thing that you've had to say of a series of very interesting things. No, seriously, because it's there's this argument, and it makes a lot of sense, right? Of, hey, we got to focus on the most cutting edge stuff because it's high net margin, hasn't been commodified, right? It's harder for our neighbors to create those things, and so that makes the most sense. But then we get into the all of the lack of resiliency in having certain things, whether they're cheap or commodified or not, be made 100% away from here, right? And so it makes me ponder on how do we make the numbers work, right? So that we don't find ourselves in best case scenario, bad supply chain situations, but some of this stuff is either national security risks or even
that's the other element. Yeah, is when we're concerned about national security, we need to know that the devices that are going into, national security sensitive systems, that they are safe. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're building them onshore than when you're purchasing them from overseas.
or even just when you look at the way that things are a lot across devices are becoming a lot more integrated. National security could involve the takeover of all of the Ford automobile models that have a certain, computer system in them that connects to the internet. And for some reason, somebody decides we're going to mess with that today. Right. And then that becomes also a data privacy issue for all the people that own those vehicles, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera,
Yes, these are all like questions that I think, we've got to be asking ourselves. I'm secretly a Luddite. I'm a little bit skeptical of new things until I've had time to sit with it and think about, am I ready to sign up for this?
We talk a lot about that here, about just the whole, we're now so good at technology. We've got to think about, is this technology truly useful to society, or are its potential negative consequences greater than its
and I think that links a little bit back to trying to be a public benefit corp. And Matt Kopp was the other podcast I listened to recently. I'm also really interested in like employee ownership or equity to, so that there's not a single person. I hope that I'm a nice person and make good decisions, but I'm sure that I will make bad choices at some point. And I'd love to structure a company that, where there are other voices that are heard and other people that can say, this is how this is the right way to do things. And, should we do this? Maybe we shouldn't. Sometimes it's better not to do something. So,
yeah.
So you're not quite ready to deploy your digital twin to go out and get more consulting, but the group wisdom is recognized, and we're striving toward that as we build whatever we're building.
Exactly.
Things that really help people. Awesome. Well, we are coming up on some time here, and want to definitely appreciate you being on with us. I also want to give you a chance to call out if there's anything, as far as folks that might be interested in working with Rugged Micropower, investors that might be interested in learning more, or just, local folks that might be looking for a startup to come work for in the future as you grow. How can people find you, and what's the best way to reach out?
Well, I do have a website. It's mostly a placeholder, but it's ruggedmicropower.com. So you'll find that there. And I am on LinkedIn, Paul Shepard, and it's SHEPHERD, which is misspelled 99 times out of 100. So great ways to connect with me. And I would say, I've been on a co-founder search journey and continue to be. I think that, I tend to be more of a technical systems, problem person. We're going to need people who actually are executing, don't fall in love with the solution, but we have to have people that are going to be focusing on reliability. And then, also on business side. So, and that's one of the things I'm really excited as part of this Launch VT cohort is to continue to get to know the people in our region, that are excited about building things. And when I say things, I mean companies, organizations.
I was going to say, and to that point, folks can, follow Launch VT and follow your progress there, as well as the other cohort, and they'll start getting some more current updates as you progress in the pitch competition there as well.
Exactly. Yes, I should have the date. It's in June.
All right, Paul, really appreciated your time with us tonight. Thank you so much for sharing about your journey and what we hope's ahead for you.
Thank you. It's been a privilege.
Find Innovato2 on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and subscribe to Interchain Live on YouTube for video podcasts. Innovato2 is a collaboration of Interchain Live and M the Media Project.